Today we're going to be learning Bava Metzia Daf Sun-Fri. It's the Daf for Shabbat. We're going to get started now with a story at the bottom of Samach Hey Amud Bet. What we're mainly grappling with today is the issue of somebody saying something that they don't really mean. And when I take words out of my mouth and I say something, it could be interpreted in some other way. So particularly if it's an exaggeration or I have an ulterior motive. So we're going to get started right now with the story at the bottom of Samach Hey Amud Bet. So, person sold land to someone without a guarantee, which means that if it gets seized because of a loan, then tough luck on the buyer. Obviously, they bought it for a lower price because they're getting really, it's a bit of a risky venture. So the person who sold it to the other person, the land without achrayut, saw that the other person was kind of unhappy. So why are you unhappy? Don't be unhappy. Seller says, I'll give you, if they take the land away because of some obligation I have, I'll give you the land back. I'll give you the value of the land. I'll give you the value of your investment. And I'll give you all the produce that was in the land. Meimar says, this person is not obligated at all. They were just trying to make the person feel better. Rashi says tanchumin, right? Like to console the person. They really didn't mean it. So Rashi says Tamemar, what's your motivation for saying this? In other words, are you saying it's because the quote unquote wrong person said it? In other words, who should have made this stipulation? The one who bought it, not the one who sold it. The one who sold it had no motivation involved at all. They, in fact, got a good deal out of this. The one who bought it should have insisted on this. So is it because, in this case, it's the mocher kamatne. The mocher is the one who made the condition, and that's why you assume the seller just said it for, to make the other person feel better. If that's what you're going to say, then elamanita, then the brighter we saw at the end of the previous page, and when the person said, right, I sold my land because I was desperate for money, and the buyer said, listen, when you get the money, I'll give it back to you. We allow that kind of statement because we don't look at this as an interest payment because they really have no culpability. They don't have to commit to their words. Now there it's the same idea here. It's just the reverse. There, the seller should have made that stipulation. I sold my land out of desperation. I'm the one who should have stipulated that if I get the money, right, commit to me that you'll let me buy my land back. But it wasn't the seller who made the stipulation, it was the buyer. Now, you would think then it's the same as this. Because it's the wrong person making that statement, they didn't really mean it. But over there it said, what was the difference between the two cases that we saw there? The reason was because the person said, I'll do this on my own. In other words, I'll do it if I feel like it. And that's why it didn't work. But the whole reason it doesn't work is because he specifically said, I'll do this if I feel like it. But if he hadn't said that, we wouldn't have said, oh yeah, the wrong person said it. So it was just to make the other person feel better and they didn't really mean it and it wouldn't be binding. No, it sounds like it would be binding, and it was only not binding because he said, I'll give you back your land when you get the money, but only if I feel like it. Meaning I don't have to commit to it for real. And that's why it's not a real commitment. And that's why actually you can do this because there's no interest issue. To which they answer, no, really, it's pitume ba'alma. And it's because the wrong person did it, meaning the one who didn't need the commitment, right? Again, if you want something stipulated in contract because it's for your benefit, then you should insist on it when the other side says it. And again, in these cases, right, they're just saying it to make it seems like they're saying it to make the other person feel better because it's the wrong person. That's why it doesn't work. So how do you relate to the fact that we explain the difference between those two cases is because he said, well, only if I really want to. Because what they meant was he's like someone who says midate. Okay, it's anytime it's the opposite side, Would it really, right? The wrong person doing it, it's like they're saying, well, if I feel like it, because there's no real commitment involved. Another similar case, but now we're moving out of the world of financial issues, mamonot, we're moving into Isser Beheter, a get. There was a guy on his deathbed. He wrote a get to his wife. But okay, so he was on his deathbed. What happened? He didn't want his wife to have to do yibum or chalitza. So what did he do, right? It's an unfortunate situation now. There's a lot of unfortunate women who were married, young marrieds, their husbands died in war, and they're now left without children. It doesn't always happen with war, but that's something we've seen a lot in the last number of months, unfortunately. And a lot of these women have to undergo a chalitza ceremony. Now, this man wanted to prevent his wife from having to do that. So on his deathbed, he basically says to his wife, here's a get. But he was sighing and hemming and hawing, and he, was not so happy about it. What are you worried about? What was he obviously worried about? Maybe I'll miraculously survive, and then my wife won't be married to me anymore. So she says to him, what are you worried about? If you stay alive, I'm yours. Okay, so what are you worried about? I'll be married to you. What is she basically saying? Well, commentaries offer different explanations, but Rashi says basically this is like a get al tanai. She's basically saying the get will only be a get if you die. Now remember, you can't give a get after death. If you learn Seder Nashim, you know this. But it's like saying this will be your get from now in the event that I die, which I'm not going to get into all the details with that. We saw it in Nashim, you could do such a thing. So on Rav Zvid, Rav Zvid says there's no validity to her words. It's just like these other cases. She was just trying to make him feel better, but she didn't really mean it. Because remember, again, it's like we said before. He's the one who wants it. She's the one who promises. You can just assume she was just trying to make him feel better. Amalei Rabbi Achami Difti le Ravina. Rabbi Achami Difti, though, says to Ravina, wait a minute. Ila Pitume Milta Mai. This has nothing to do with Pitume Milta. What? You're trying to say if it weren't for Pitume Milta, what? It would work? If she really meant it seriously? Bedida Kaima de Mishtitna Begita? Is it up to her to be able to put a condition into a get? Of course not. Bedida Kaima le Mishtitna. The woman doesn't give the get, the husband does. It's up to him to put the condition into the get. The condition a woman puts on a get is irrelevant. She's not the one giving the get. So her condition is not even a relevant factor. That's why this isn't considered anything at all. And then that doesn't teach you anything about Pitume Milta. But they say no, because could be that when he gave the get, he had in mind her stipulation. And therefore it could have been pushed onto him. But the Yad Gita, and then he gave that on, we combined. Her words stand up as a condition that when he gives the get, he gives it on the basis of her words. You could have said that. But Kamash Malan, that her words are meaningless because they were really just there to make him feel better. Now we go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah gives a case where somebody gives a loan to someone based on the field and says, from here, we're going to get into a big topic called the Smachta. We're going to learn about more in Sanhedrin and other sugyot when it comes up. We've seen it before. So basically what happened here, someone gives someone a loan on the field, but the field is worth a lot more money than the loan. So let's say the loan is $100 and the field is $1,000. So he says, listen, if I don't pay the loan back within, actually in the Mishnah, the case is the lender says, if you don't pay me back within 3 years, that field will be mine. Okay. And in fact, it becomes theirs in 3 years. This works. So now I'm a Rav Huna. We're going to have a machloket, Rav Huna, Rav Nachman, and then Rav Nachman's going to do a total change. But first, let's see the machloket before Rav Nachman changes his mind. I'm a Rav Huna. Bishat matama'ot kanakol. If they agreed to this at the beginning, the whole thing is acquired. Lachar matama'ot lo kana ela keneged ma'otav. But if it was done after the money was given, then it's useless. Okay? Then it's not totally useless because I gave you a loan, let's say, for the field. You promised me the field, but the fact that you promised me the entire field is relevant. If you don't pay after 3 years, I can take from the field, but just keneged ma'otav, just $100 worth from that field. So basically, Rav Huna says, if we agreed to this at the beginning, then you really meant to commit to it because You wanted the loan to happen so badly that you were willing to commit that if you don't pay in 3 years, you will give back the whole thing. But after you give the money already, then it's too late, because it's not too late, but it's saying it's irrelevant. You commit, if I say, listen, let's say I gave you the money already, and then I said, listen, but you got to promise me that you'll pay me after 3 years. But the loan was given. I gave you the money already. So when you commit, yeah, I'll give you that, you have no motivation. The whole motivation in the beginning was you're willing to commit this very expensive field because you really want the loan. Once I already give you the money, you have no motivation to commit to that. So you don't really mean what you're saying. Rav Nachman Amar Afilu Lachar Matama Kanahako. Rav Nachman says, no, what are you talking about? If the Lova agreed, then the Lova agreed, and I can seize that entire property if you don't pay after 3 years. Well, Avi Rav Nachman Uvda Gabe Reish Galuta Kishmate. So case comes before Rav Nachman in the house of the Reish Galuta. If you remember, in the court of the Reish Galuta, Reish Galuta was the Egdalarch, was very wealthy. Rav Nachman was married to his daughter Yalta, and he often hangs out in his court, and he's kind of like the rabbi of the Reish Galuta. And it makes sense that since the Reish Galuta was wealthy, and he was the son-in-law, that his crowd was the wealthier people, and he sided. This is to side on the side of the wealthy, because you're basically giving power to the creditors to be able to seize property. Kare Rav Yehuda Lishtari. Rav Yehuda rips up the document. In other words, Rav Nachman awarded this big piece of land to the creditor, even though, right, the lender, even though the borrower didn't, you could claim maybe the borrower didn't mean it, and even though it happened after the money was given and the commitment was later, he allowed it. Rav Yehuda says, what are you talking about? He rips up the shtar. So now there's two versions of the response. Well, what happened was, first, Amar le Reish Galuta, Rav Yehuda kara l'shtareh. So the Reish Galuta goes to Rav Nachman and said, Rav Yehuda tore up your shtar by giving the malveh, the lender, the power to seize the property. Amar le. So now there's two versions of how Rav Nachman responded to this. Amar le, dardik hakare. What, you think it's a child who ripped this up? This is Gavar Rabakari. This is a big person, Rav Yehuda. He must have had a good reason. He must have had a good reason. He must have seen a good reason to rip it up. And therefore, what am I going to say? Okay, I'll accept what Rav Yehuda did. The second version has one similarity, which is the child. It's a child ripped it up. Is the words that clearly Rav Nachman used. The question is, how did he use them? Was it saying, what, you think this is a child? No, he's an important person, and don't discount what Rav Yehuda did. The second version is the opposite, but it's a disparaging statement. He said, that's a child who ripped it up. Why? Because anyone compared to me when it comes to rulings in court is like a child. In other words, I have the final say. Very strong in his opinion. So either he agreed with Rav Yehuda, conceded to him, or he was very against him. But either way, it really doesn't matter, because Hadar Amar Rav Nachman, at some point after this, Rav Nachman changes his mind. And while Rav Yehuda, if you remember, Rav Huna said it works if you agreed at the time of the loan, Rav Nachman said it works even after the loan if you agreed to that. Now comes Rav Nachman and says, like, neither. This statement never works. On what basis? Because we're going to see in a minute, it's a smachta. The person who committed to this never really meant it. Why on earth would you commit to $1,000 land in place of a $100 loan, right? Either because it's a total exaggeration, or because you were only doing it to make sure the loan happened. You didn't really mean it, right? How many times do we make empty promises, empty threats, empty, right? Parents do this all the time, right? So there's always empty things going on that people say in order to encourage people to do things, in order to, right, prevent people from doing bad things. We say things all the time that we don't really mean. And therefore, they're not binding. That's what's fascinating about it. So, so Rava says to Rav Nachman, wait a minute. But Rav Nachman, how can you say this? The Mishnah says it works. Amar le, ani omer asmachta kanya. I thought that asmachta works. Uminyume amar asmachta lo kanya. But Minyume said that asmachta doesn't work. And that's the debate here. And then they're going to say, well, Minyume, and basically I decided to go with Minyume. So Minyume kashem anitin. So they say, but okay, it's very nice Minyume said this, and you agree with him, but it goes against the Mishnah. And how's Minyume going to explain the Mishnah? To which we have two possible answers. Ibai Dema, Matniti Rabbi Yossi. Either you could say that the Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi. In other end, the Amar Asmachta Kanya. Because Rabbi Yossi holds that Asmachta does work. In other words, we have a debate about Asmachta. Does it work? Does it not work? The famous sugya where this comes up is about gambling. And about gambling because is a gambler a thief? Because if nobody really intends to get their money lost, right, then nobody really intends to give their money to the other side. It means that all the money in a casino is basically stolen money because nobody really wanted, in order for a kinyan to work, you have to want to have the money pass hands and be owned by the other person. Since you never really want it to pass hands, then you don't really give it to the other side. And perhaps that's one way of looking at that. Asmachta is not kon. So again, there's a whole debate about asmachta. What exactly defines a case as being asmachta? This is one of the sugyot where it seems like, number one, it's an exaggerated sum, and you're just saying it to try to get the loan to happen. So we could just easily say the Mishnah holds that asmachta is kone, but we don't hold that way because other Tanaim don't think so. Ibai dema, alternative, the amalei knei me'achshav. Well, even though asmachta doesn't work, but if you did an actual kinyan and you said you're going to acquire it now, well, then it works. In other words, if I said, listen, if you don't pay within 3 years, I want that land, and you say, okay, fine, here, you can acquire the land from now in the event that I don't give you in 3 years. Then already you made it clear that you were serious. So then it would work, and that could be what the case in the Mishnah was. This is just a kind of funny thing. Yenuka is child, and Keshisha is old. So the two sons of Rav Chisda were called Mar young and Mar old. So it could be they had the same name. Their name was actually Mar, and the added name was to distinguish between them. Anyway, there's a funny different interpretations about why one is called young and one is old. The obvious would be that this one was the younger one and that one was the older one. Some people say Rav Chisda called the one young because he was born to Rav Chisda when Rav Chisda was young, which means he's older now. And the Keshisha one, the older one, is the one who was born to Rav Chisda when Rav Chisda was old, and that's why he's actually the younger one. And then it comes out the opposite. Either which way, these two sons of Rav Chisda asked Rav Ashi the following question. Haki Amri Nahardya Mishmei Rav Nachman. This is what we heard in Nahardya. They said in the name of Rav Nachman, Hi Asmachta, this Asmachta kind of case. Bizimne Kanya below Zimne lo Kanya. But when it's done in its time, it works. When it's done not in its time, it doesn't work. Okay, so what does this mean? Right? If it's done in its time, that means right, Bizimne means the time came to pay and the person didn't pay. So then it would be acquired. Below Zimne, if the time hasn't come yet, then it's not acquired. To which he said, Amarle, call me this Bizimne Kani, below Zimne lo Kani. What are you talking about? Everything is like that. In other words, if I make a commitment in a certain time, it obviously isn't going to be acquired before that. It will be acquired after that. It's not a unique law for asmachta, so I don't know what you mean. So we're now going to explain. Okay, fine. Let's try to reinterpret what the statement of Rav Nachman was, because that doesn't make any sense. Dilma hachi kamaritu. Maybe this is what Rav Nachman meant, because they heard that he said something, and then Rav Ashi says that doesn't make any sense. I'll suggest something alternative. Let's say we made this commitment in the beginning. I said, if you don't pay within 3 years, you'll have to give me that land. And you said, yes, no problem. And then I bump into you after 2 years. It's not yet the time for you to pay. And you say, we have a discussion again. And I say, you're going to pay me, that big land if you don't pay. And you say, yeah, no problem. If you agree after the loan again, and we have this discussion, I bump into you, that's eshkachai, I find you, b'go zimne, b'toch hazman, within the time frame. And you said, it's yours, then it works. Okay, in other words, again, it'll only work when we get to the 3-year mark. It's not mine yet, and you don't pay. But you'll understand this better when you see the other case that doesn't work. But if I find you after the 3 years are up, and I say, you promised that land, you giving it to me? Lo kane. And you say kne, you say, yeah, it's yours. That actually doesn't work. My time. Well, what's the reason? Again, you just said it because you were embarrassed that you didn't have cash on you to pay me back. So you just said, oh, yeah, you can have my land, but you didn't really mean it. You're still trying to find money to pay me back. But velohi. But now they say this statement that you said in the name of Rav Nachman that, Rav Ashi was trying to explain Rav Nachman like this. They say, but this actually isn't true. Because afilu bego, in other words, what happened? Rav Nachman said there's a case where it works, there's a case where it doesn't work. So we came up with these two cases. And again, the assumption is if it's within the time, there's no reason why I would have to say that. The only reason I would say it is if I was really serious. But after, it's because I'm embarrassed. But now they come and say, no, it's not clear who's talking. Maybe Rav Ashi, or maybe the Gemara is just saying this isn't true. Because if I bump into you within the 2 years and you say, oh yeah, I'll give it to you, no problem, you could still say you were doing it because you were embarrassed. Why is that? Or you had an ulterior motive, I should say, not embarrassment this time, but you had an ulterior motive for saying it even though you didn't really mean it. You didn't want me chasing you on the day of the 3 years being up. So you figured if you kind of committed to me, yeah, I'll give you the land, you won't come bothering me on that first day and insisting on getting your money back because you know you have the guarantee of the land. Again, you don't really have a guarantee of the land. That's the whole point, but I'm making you try to believe that you are, but I'm saying it and I don't really, really mean it. I just really had an ulterior motive of getting you to leave me alone on the first day the 3 years are up. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, Hi asmachta zimnin kanya v'zimnin lo kanya. The asmachta, this asmachta thing that we say, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When you make this kind of a statement. So now, meaning if you say, in the event that I don't pay, then, right, then I will give you this big field. Well, what's the situation? So I'll already tell you from the beginning, I'm going to go with Rashi along the whole section here. There's different interpretations, and it's a little bit complicated, which is why there's different interpretations. Hard to fully understand Rashi to the end, but we'll go with Rashi. So Rashi already says from the beginning that we're talking about that I find you on the day you're supposed to pay. So 3 years are up, I go find you, and what are you doing? You're sitting drinking beer with your friends, okay, or just drinking beer. You don't seem very stressed, as opposed to kamahape chazuze, you're stressed for money, right? You're looking around to try to get money anywhere. Now, what's the difference? If you're sitting drinking beer and you don't really care, then what does it show? It shows that you don't, second, if you're sitting there drinking beer, it shows that you don't care that I'm going to take your property. And therefore it means that in the beginning, you must have committed to it wholeheartedly, which means I'm going to acquire the land. But if you're busy, mahape chazuze, and you're stressed out as anything, it shows you don't want to lose that land, which means you didn't want to lose it in the first place, which means you never really meant it. To which Amar le Rav Achami difti le Ravina, he comes in again with a question. We had him earlier in the daf questioning. What do you mean? You're reading into a situation that could be read into otherwise. Maybe he's scared out of his mind. And that's why he's trying to calm himself down by going to drink. Right? We all know people get drunk for all sorts of reasons, often to just escape their problems. And maybe he's terribly worried that you're going to take his land. And, he never really intended for you to take his land, and maybe it shouldn't work. Or maybe he's relying on someone else to bring the money. He's not stressed about it because he has someone else who he thinks is going to bring it. Maybe in the end, the person doesn't, but maybe that's why. So these are two reasons why he maybe isn't worried, even though he really doesn't want to lose his land, which means he didn't really give you the land in the first place. So Ravina is now going to try to understand Rav Papa in a bit of a different way, that we can make a distinction in a different case. Ela Amar Ravina, if he's very careful about, and again, according to Rashi, we're talking about the person's trying to sell movable items, but he can't get the right price for them, and he doesn't sell it because people are only willing to buy for lower than the market price. And if he's not willing to sell, what do you see here? He's not desperate, right? If you're desperate to get money, you'll sell for any price. So that would indicate that he's not desperate. If he's not desperate, it means he was willing to give you the land. He's not worried about giving you the land. He wasn't worried about it in the first place either. Comes again and questions him and says, what are you talking about? Maybe he was worried that if he sells all this, a bunch of movable property for lower than the market price, then all of his land is going to be devalued, right? And basically, everyone's going to say, oh, well, this guy's desperate to sell their stuff. And therefore, it's going to drop the property value of everything else they own. And that's why. In other words, they really are desperate for money, and they really don't want to give you the field, and therefore the field wouldn't be acquired. It's just they have a different motivation why they're not willing to sell their movable property. Ela Amar Papa, but now we're going to have a final explanation of this. I kapi ba'ara vadai kane. Okay, what does Rashi explain? Kapi ba'ara shelo yimkor shum karka afilu b'shovyo. If you're not willing to sell any land to pay that loan back, even though you can get its market value, then that would be an indication that you're not desperate. And because you don't really care to give up that piece of property, and then the other, I as the lender can seize the property. So again, we learned that asmachta isn't kona, even though there are some who say it is. But even if you say it isn't, we have to determine what is asmachta, what is not. And sometimes your actions can have an effect on, even your actions, according to Rashi, after 3 years, can have an effect on how we understand your intent in the original case. That Amar Rav Papa. Furthermore, Rav Papa says, even though the rabbis say asmachta doesn't work to acquire the land here, and like in the Mishnah, but apotiki havya lemigma bine. But you might remember apotiki, that's when you designate a particular field for collection. This field is used to collect the land, okay? You can collect from that land its value, not the $1,000 worth, but $100 from that field that he promised. Okay, so even though asmachta is lokanya, but yes, it's partially because you can collect its value. But that's going to be a little bit of a problem. Amarle Rav Huna bridge Rav Natan the Rav Papa. You never said take this to collect the loan. You just said if I don't pay the loan, then take it. But it wasn't take it to collect the loan. It was, and we don't even accept that statement. It was dismissed as a statement you didn't really mean. So Amarle Marzutra Bered Rav Mary the Ravina. Amarle Kne Lemigbe Mine Pane. Say, if you say acquire it in order to collect, then it works. So they say, but still I don't get it. So asmachta lokanya, but we dismiss that statement entirely. So how can you say that partially works? Ela potiki de kamar of papa maihi de amarle lo yehelach peraon elamizo. If you said, listen, if I don't pay you in 3 years, take this land, even though it's worth a lot more, and this is the only land you're going to be able to collect from, then we ignore the first part of your statement, but we accept the part of your statement about it being an apotiki. And if you said it in that way, then you could collect. But anything short of that, you wouldn't be able to. Another story. He sold a piece of land to his friend with a warranty, a guarantee. So now I sold you a piece of land with a guarantee, and you said, well, when I come to collect, can I take it from the best of your land? I said, not exactly. I won't give you the best of the best. Because I want that for myself. But I will give you from a different edit that I have. Okay, so I promised you my second best piece of land. In the end, they did seize the property from you. So now you come to me and want to get the best of my best. But what happened? A flash flood came, or a river came and ran through my field and destroyed my best of my best field. So now the question becomes, I only have my best field now really kind of went up a level to the best of my best. Or maybe I already committed you my best field, even though it was second best at the time. Now it's first best, but I already committed to you, so it's yours. So that's the question. Rav Papa said, I promised the edit. You get the edit. It's still there. He keeps bothering Ravina about all these cases. I told you could collect from there when I had a better land. Now my second best moves up to my first best, and I never committed to that. So we have a difference of opinion here about what to do, although it sounds like, because it started with Rav Papa thought to do this, but then it sounds like that we in the end accept what Rav Achami Difti said. Rav Bar Shaba, Rav Bar Shaba have a masik be Rav Kahana Zuze. Rav Kahana was owed money by this guy, Rav Bar Shaba. Amarle, Rav Bar Shaba said, Ilo paranachlach liyom ploni, gavi mehaycham. If I don't pay you back by the following day, then take from this wine. Sefer of Papa Lemeimer, when we say asmachta doesn't work, that's land. Why? Because most people don't sell their land all the time. You only sell land if you're desperate for money, usually, or something like that. Not something you sell all the time. So therefore, you don't really mean it. But wine, I produce wine. I sell it all the time. It's like kizuze dami. It's like money. So maybe you really did commit to give that whole barrel of wine. because it goes in and out more, right? It's a more fluid type of thing. Amalei Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yoshua Rav Papa. No. This is what they say in the name of Rabbah. Anytime you say, if I don't do this, I'll promise you that, it doesn't work. Now, this is not totally true, because what do you mean? We make conditions all the time. So it would have to be an if. Again, the commentaries have to figure out what kind of if doesn't work, right? It would have to be an if that's either exaggerated or unlikely that you would commit that type thing. And basically he says, it doesn't even, it would work, right? It wouldn't work. Asmachta lo kanya is even if we're talking about wine, movable items, not just land. Okay, last thing for today. Amar Rav Nachman, Hashad Amar Rabbanan Asmachta lo kanya, Hadra are v'Hadra peri. Now that the rabbi said Asmachta lo kanya, let's say, go back to our case. I said, I'll give you this land, but I'll give you my money to borrow, but if you don't pay me in 3 years, I'm taking that piece of land, and you agree. And then I take your piece of land. Now, Asmachta lo kanya, I don't really deserve that piece of land. And then you find out after I seize the property that actually it wasn't legal that I seized the property. So you go to court and get the land back. Well, it says here you get the land back and you get all the produce back. Anything that I ate off that land goes back to you. But wait, this seems to indicate that Rav Nachman holds that if you give up on something, like you gave up on your land when I took it, and you said, okay, well, you didn't want to, but you gave it to me anyway, and it was mine. And then it turns out it was a mistake, and therefore you get it back. Now, in the meantime, you gave me rights to it at a certain point for a little while. So that's called mechila, but bita'ut, by mistake. So you, pardon me, kind of let me use your stuff, but by mistake. Now, it sounds like Rav Nachman's saying, well, that's not mechila, because you get it back. But that's going to contradict the same Rav Nachman says somewhere else. Wasn't it said, if you sell a tree, okay, a palm tree to your friend, when there's nothing growing on the tree, you're basically selling them the fruits of the tree only. I'm a Rav Huna. Now, this is something that's non-existent. You can't really do a sale like that. So Rav Huna says, until the fruits are growing on the tree, you can change your mind. But once they came into the world, but once the fruits are growing on the tree, it's too late to change your mind. In other words, then whatever we said earlier kind of kicks into place, even though it didn't kick into place then, kicks into place later. Now here comes Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman amar, you can always change your mind about the sale anytime you want. Now, here comes the thing. But Amar Rav Nachman modina, but I do admit though, the ishamit va'achil lo mafkina mineh. If I let you eat there, and then decided later, right? So they start growing and you start eating them, and then later I change my mind about it. I can't go back and take the fruits you ate. Because even though it was mechila b'ta'ut, there was really no sale to begin with. But it's mechila. I already let you eat them, so we let it go. So why in this case do we have to give it back? To which we're going to get back to our interest issue, repeat, and say, that's because hatam zvine hacha halva. The Gemara answers by distinguishing between a sale and a loan. In the case of the selling the fruits of the tree, what happens? It's a case of there's a sale, and then the extra fruits, we basically say it's mechila. You get to keep the extra fruits, and it's not considered to be viewed like interest. But in the case of a loan, we have a problem, because what happened here? I loaned you money, you gave me land. Then, instead of the loan, then in the end, you get your land back. I get my money back. You're going to eventually have to pay me back, right? Because you didn't give me that land in the end. It was a smachta. But if I keep the fruits, it's going to be a problem. Because then in the end, I'll get my money back for the loan, and I've eaten fruits in the meantime. That looks like interest. So when it's a sale, we're not worried about it looking like interest. But when it's a loan, we're particularly worried about interest, and therefore it's going to be a problem. Okay, that's it for today. We're going to do a quick review. So we have, we started with these cases of where people say things l'pitume ba'alma. We also took it even to a get case where the woman promised something, which really, people promise things for all sorts of reasons. They have ulterior motives. From there, we got into this asmachta lo kanya, and basically how we understand the Mishnah, because the Mishnah seems to be asmachta. Either it's Rabbi Yossi that is asmachta, or there was, and he holds it works, or there was actually a kinyan. Maybe that's why. And then we talked about cases where you would say asmachta, cases where you wouldn't say asmachta. We got into a bunch of different details trying to figure out what the distinctions that people had said, because kind of people quoted people, but it wasn't sure what they actually meant. We had to clarify those things. Then we said you could actually collect from this property at least, but then we said that was only if you really made it in a potiki. That was another statement of our Papa. Then we got into these stories, these cases that happened, and then, right, we had the idei edit, where the idei edit was no longer in existence, and then does the edit become the idei edit? Does it take its place, or did you already commit that? Right, really talking about all sorts of commitments and what did you mean by what you said, which is a fascinating topic in terms of the fact that if we think you could have meant something else, then you actually don't even have to commit. We always say, your word is your word. You committed to something, but not necessarily. Okay, we ended with these two other cases of Rav Kahana and whether we distinguish between land and wine, which we said in the end we don't. Either which way we say it's asmachta. And then this last thing about the payroll. And basically how we're concerned in a loan case that you have to give back all the payroll. Otherwise, it might look like you're collecting interest, whereas that wouldn't be a case in a sale. With that, wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov.